What are the consequences of Columbia University's capitulation to President Trump? Join Richard Ebeling and me in this week's Libertarian Angle as we examine that question. Hi, I'm Jacob Hornberger, president of the Future of Freedom Foundation, and welcome to this week's Libertarian Angle, the show that brings you all the principled case for the libertarian philosophy and has for many, many years now. Richard Ebeling is my co-host, and you see him there on the screen. Richard, good to see you again for another round of Libertarian Angle.
It's good to be with you and our viewers and listeners.
Yeah, Richard, of course, is a professor of economics at the Citadel, former president of the Foundation for Economic Education, former Ludwig von Mises professor at Hillsdale College. And, well, we're going to be talking about Hillsdale College today, Richard, because I want to discuss this situation with Columbia University. President Trump issued some kind of order or decree or whatever to Columbia University decrying their policies with respect to people who were protesting against Israel and some of their hiring policies, diversity, equity, and whatever the other one is, and told Columbia University that if they didn't comply with his edicts, that he was going to cancel $400 million in federal aid to, or federal grants to Columbia. So after thinking the matter over, the president or interim president of Columbia decided to capitulate and agree to whatever it was that Trump was demanding that Columbia do, and in return would presumably continue receiving this $400 million. So there's a lot of lessons here, but I think one of the big lessons is that he who pays the piper calls the tune. That this shows you what happens when people go on the dole, including universities. That especially when the dole is extremely large, like it is here, $400 million is not a pittance. It's a considerably large sum of money. And when an institution like Columbia is dependent on this large amount of the dole, its tendency will be to comply with whatever the federal government orders. That if you want your money, this is what you're going to have to do. And so there's a sense of independence that is lost when you go on the dole, because the person that's, or the entity that's giving you the dole is going to have strings attached to the dole. So you either comply with the strings or the orders or the edicts, or you lose your dole. And I think it's important to point out that Columbia is a private institution. I mean, it's incredible that the federal government is even involved. The president or Congress or anybody else in the federal government is involved with telling a private institution how it should run its affairs. In the ideal libertarian world, every institution would be private. Every educational institution would be private. Why shouldn't Columbia be free to manage its affairs the way it wants? If it wants DEI and its hiring practices, why shouldn't it be free to do that without interference by the federal government? But we live in a system, in a society where everybody's come to accept the notion that the federal government is entitled to put its nose into everybody's business and to tell higher institutions of higher learning, along with lots of other businesses, how to run their affairs. And if we're going to ever get back to a free society, a genuinely free society, it seems to me, Richard, that there's got to be a complete separation of education in the state at all levels, not just at the local and state level, but also at the federal level, where there are no federal grants and there are no state funds at the state level being used to fund higher education or really anybody else. What do you think?
Well, I think we should understand the historical perspective that you yourself were just raising. And that is, before the Second World War, there might be obviously there were state colleges and universities, and there would be issues about, whatever strings state governments were imposing on the university system. This particular state level history of which I know very little. But it is the case that there was virtually little, if any, federal money flowing into this college and university system before the Second World War, as I understand it. Where it did develop was after the Second World War. And it always, not all, that would be going too far, but a good portion of it was connected with the Cold War. The idea that science and research and technology needed to be funded by the federal government to foster and cultivate and incentivize uh, people on university and college faculties, especially in the sciences, to develop the means by which the United States could have the military prowess to stand up to and, if necessary, defeat the Soviet Union in a war. So, in fact, a good part of this mentality that physicists and chemists and technological developers among faculty just can't get by without their federal funding. It has historically been wrapped up with the war mentality and the nation state and national security state mentality that emerged after the Second World War. So again, foreign interventionism led to an increase and a significant influence of domestic interventionism in terms of federal funding of higher education. There was also the fact that all this money flowed in with the GI Bill after the Second World War. The idea that men were going to return from the Second World War and they should be rewarded for having given up several years of their lifetime serving in the military, with the US government helping them to have the educational step on the ladder that would give them a chance for higher and better job, higher paying and better jobs looking to the future. There was also the fact that the government was very concerned that with a number of people who were going to be let go from the military, millions of people serving actively in the military during the Second World War, that the Keynesian horror would occur, a vast unemployment with no jobs to be filled. So in one way, public education, state educational funding for higher education became, in a sense, a public works project. You're having large numbers of former members of the military working in towards their degrees, government subsidized employment in the firms of advanced education. But separate from that historical aspect to it, uh, the very point that you raised is fundamentally important. And that is, if the government is going to significantly fund student scholarships, research and development programs, subsidies for the not just sciences, but the humanities and the fine arts, which the money flows to, invariably, as you were saying, he who pays the piper calls the tune. Now, you have a situation in which, well, what will the government foster and cultivate? If you went back to the 1950s and 60s, by golly, you wanted to foster and cultivate patriotic Americans in terms of curriculum, focus, sponsorship of research and writing. But now it's changed, particularly with a variety of leftist influences leading to DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that this was fostered just in the most recent time by the Biden administration. They were happy to fund all of these things. The new fad and fashion that all of America is based upon 1619, the arrival of the first slaves to Virginia from Africa, and therefore America is embedded in historical and inescapable racism. And we have to have a new ideology of not this false individualism, but race and gender collectivism, with the establishment of quotas and funding and respect and apportionment of positions and research. But that's the agenda that the Biden administration was willing to subsidize. Now Trump comes in and he says this, in fact, is a form of discrimination. He's defining Title IX, as it's called, in a way for that to talk about people in terms of gender and race categories is itself a form of discrimination, and therefore he wants to move it in that direction. But the point is that, as you were suggesting, if institutions of higher learning were private, it wouldn't become a political football. If an institution of higher learning wants, based upon tuitions, that is the demand by students themselves and their parents paying the tuitions, or the donors who are giving scholarships or endowments wish to have programs, departments focusing on this, then it's private money. If an individual is not interested in these things, the parents, the students, the donors, they would direct their attendance at a college or university and funding of scholarships and endowments in a totally different direction. Now, that itself would be a form of diversity. But the fact is, when the government has so much money to hand out to so many institutions of higher learning, that it envelops the entire schooling network, then as sort of the big player in the game financially, the way that the ideology that has captured the federal government at a particular moment in time has a way of skewing it all in one direction, which means all those in the society, citizens and taxpayers, who don't agree with it, feel that it's a wrong direction, a waste or dangerous way of funding in terms of their view of what they think America should be about, ends up having to subsidize and pay for values and views and ideas and ideologies they may diametrically be opposed to. This is the thing now when Trump is saying, don't do this, you see up in arms the faculty, the administrators, their supporters in the wider community, the Bernie Sanders, the Elizabeth Warrens, going ballistic about this. Because we want this federal money to be sponsoring this. No, we want this federal money to be sponsoring that. Oh, yeah, well, the only way to prevent this, to depoliticize it, denationalize it, to fully privatize it, is to get government out of education. Now, of course, this would be beyond our discussion for today. I would say from kindergarten through the PhD, but certainly in the context of what we're talking about right now, from the bachelor's degree through the PhD, in terms of the Columbia universities, because of the controversies right now. Because unless you get this, what's going to happen is that, let us suppose that the next presidential election passes back into Democratic hands, and it's the same type of ideology. Well, it's going to be like a ping pong ball. Okay, now it's a now yes, now no, yeah, now yes, now no, now no. I'm getting dizzy and just thinking about it. And you see, and this is also a thing with this interim president at Columbia University, which has resulted in her stepping down just a few days ago. She wrote this letter to the administration. I guess it'd be Department of Justice because of Title IX. Yes, we're going to comply with what the president has proposed in whatever official government letter went out to them. But you see, I think it was the New York Times reported, well, yes, she was telling faculty and administrators who were upset about this that she was caving in, that supposedly, wink, wink, of course, we're going to do this to keep the $500 million still flowing towards us. But, we'll just not talk about it. And we'll find little ways to get through the crooks, the crannies and the crooks, right? The interstices of the system to keep it going, and just call it a different name, and just, 2 steps forward, only one step, 2 steps forward, only 1 step backward. So this is basically, this shows the hypocrisy, the corruption. Once you have a system in which individuals can't live without the government money, it's their fix, right? It's their financial fix from the feds. And now fearful of withdrawals, they have to cave in, but at the same, to get their methadone from the government, but at the same time, to be concerned, well, we're not going to really get off our government financial drug. We're just going to hide it and do a little bit of this way and that way until the next administration can come in, which we're confident will be back on track with us. So it results in corruption, hypocrisy, mismanagement, lies, deceit, manipulation by both sides. The only way to eventually destroy this is to just get government out of money. Now, if I can just say one more thing, and that is how this all began as a controversial issue. And as you pointed out, it had to do, beginning last year, with massive demonstrations at a number of schools, but certainly Columbia was considered sort of focal point of it, of demonstrations by those who were supporting this Palestinian cause as opposed to Israel, and supposedly the maltreatment and discriminatory language, bullying that some Jewish students reported experiencing on campus. This is a matter of the university itself. if the government wasn't putting its nose into it and trying to determine how Columbia University should manage its own internal affairs by controlling the purse strings, what you would discover, I would suggest, is that Columbia would have to deal with this. Now, if they want to support that cause, but with their private donors and the tuition money of the students who are paying to attend, then that's their policy. But then all you can do is ask the question, do students and the administration sign a contract, that is an agreement when a student comes to campus? I will be I will be treated with respect. I will be not open to abuse, harassment, or physical attack or threat. And the college or university agrees to that, just as the student agrees not to undertake those activities. Then if that's either an actual or an implied contractual arrangement between those who are attending and the institution itself, then it's a legal matter between them, where the student can say, this is a breach of the agreement. I've been promised a safe, nonviolent environment, and that has been not respected. And I demand my tuition back, or I insist that they follow their contractual obligations for a safe and secure and peaceful environment while I'm at their college, as they agreed to when they took my tuition money. Then it's just a court matter. And the courts would decide this as any dispute between two private individuals concerning the terms of their voluntary agreement. But once the government comes in, then the government ends up taking sides. The Biden administration sort of gave an explicit, disapproval of these things, but they really didn't pressure Columbia to do that much. The demonstrations went on, the sit-ins, those tent things, in spite of the fact that a number of Jewish students or supporters of Israel talked about physical harassment, etc. Now, the Trump administration is the opposite. So again, it's the ping pong ball, back and forth, back and forth. The only way to divest these things is by privatizing them. And then it'll be discovered in terms of donors and students and parents paying a tuition, what type of educational environment they want their student to live in. One of respect, tolerance, debate, openness of discourse, or intolerance and bullying, which is basically two ways of looking at things about how the environment should be run. But it would be a matter of private debate, private agreement, and private legal dispute if necessary. But you wouldn't politicize it the way it has been politicized.
Yeah, one of the fascinating aspects of this is that, for the last several years, I've gotten the impression that universities are primarily radical leftist, DEI, fiercely committed to all this. And now all of a sudden, a lot of them are running away from all that and just panicking. Oh my gosh, if they're going to go after Columbia, they'll come after us too. We need to start adopting Trump's policies. It's like there was never really a deep ideological commitment to this, or if there was, the money speaks louder. The federal money speaks louder than those commitments, which to me is kind of disgraceful also. Uh, I think it's worth pointing out what I initially talked about in the beginning about Hillsdale College, because Hillsdale really gives us the model for what we're looking for in a free society. I mean, you taught there for many years. You were the Ludwig von Mises professor. You're better off explaining this than I am, but just I'll summarize it by saying that Hillsdale takes no federal funds at all. They take no state funds at all. They are totally independent of any government control. If Trump tried to get in there and tell Hillsdale College how to run his business, the federal courts would slap him down immediately because there are no strings attached to monies that are not being given. And as you know, Richard, many years ago, the federal government, not satisfied with its control of virtually every single college, university across the land, said, well, we can't stand it. We can't stand it. We're obsessed with Hillsdale. We have to control Hillsdale too. And so they said, well, because your students take government funds, scholarships or loans, that means that we can control your admissions department. And so the Supreme Court agreed. So Hillsdale said, okay, then we're just going to terminate all federal assistance to students. And they went out and raised all the money through voluntary donations. And so now they're totally independent. And that's where Columbia should be. And that's where every single college and university should be. I also should point out that my alma mater, a Virginia Military Institute, took the exact opposite position from Hillsdale College. when they were faced with government control over the school in terms of not permitting women into the school, the school could have gone totally private, not accepted any government funds at all. And they said, "Oh no, no, no! The funds are more important, and so we'll let in women." And I'm not suggesting that this is a problem of a question of whether you should let in women or not or whatever. It's a question of control. That VMI should be free to run its affairs the way it wants, but because it takes government money, because it chose to be on the dole, that it loses its independence. And that to me is a very, very bad thing. That every college and university should be free to run its affairs the way it wants. If a college wants to be pro-Israel, fine. Advertise that. Students come there. They know what they're getting into. If they say no anti-Israel protests, well, that's a condition of entering the college. People are also free not to go to that college. Or if a college says we're anti-Semitic, and we want everybody to know we're anti-Semitic, okay, I doubt they would get a lot of students, but they should be free to do that. That's what a free society is all about, just as consumers should be free to boycott those institutions.
Yeah, I can sort of elaborate a point that you made about, was this DEI support a veneer on the surface, or was it deep? Let me suggest that from my experience, sort of inside academia, and it's not mainstream academia because where I have taught in the past or currently at the Citadel, it's a different environment. But let me say in general, the power of the DEI people, those who advocated, supposedly politically correctness, identity politics, bend the knee because any white person is a racist and all that stuff. They're suddenly mushroomed through federal funding, a huge administrative apparatus of those who were to sort of introduce these DEI programs and, dare I say, indoctrination, such that if anyone on the faculty or the administration criticized this, they could easily be in trouble. Those who were administrating it had no pressure on them because they had the federal dollars, and the federal dollars were not going to be taken away. So their jobs could never be threatened. Their ideology was being supported by the federal government tacitly, if not explicitly. And those who opposed it were basically forced into positions of self-censorship. You would hear people say these things in committee meetings or faculty meetings, and you just have to keep your mouth shut because the blade of grass who's taller than the rest is mowed down, and your career could be ruined because of a power of intimidation. Because those espousing these policies and put into positions of curriculum decision and tone of the institution did not have to worry about negative market feedback, donors withdrawing their money, parents' tuition evaporating, because the federal dollars were earmarked to sponsor these things. That imposed an ideology on faculty. I know from my own experience that when this stuff came in, even here at the Citadel, and because of the power of the federal government and the ideological environment created by it, the Accreditation Association, of which Citadel is one member in this part of the country, it was expected that a course was to be introduced that would be mandatory on teaching all students diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the positive importance of this compared to the old and wrong ideologies of America's false individualism that was really hidden racism. I can assure you that a large number of faculty would silently sit there and either in the session or afterwards just look at each other and roll their eyes. Oh God, we have to put up with this crap. But you have to keep your mouth shut because all you're going to do is get yourself in trouble. So that itself creates a hypocrisy, all right, and a corruption of your own self of not speaking out because you're afraid of your professional career, because tacitly those who are threatening you can't be touched because they're on a government subsidy dole with these monies from taxpayers to do what they want, and they can never be challenged Now Trump comes along and there he's challenging them. And suddenly the people who were uncomfortable with all this can now no longer just silently roll their eyes. They can say, well, we don't agree with this. We need to move in a more traditional direction. Because before this, the dollars were making them feel fearful. And now the dollars are suggesting they don't have to feel so fearful. And the DEI people are now under the gun. But this is all because the federal government is determining what the ideology will be. It's a propaganda tool. What will be the ideological curriculum to indoctrinate people from kindergarten through the PhD, or at least influence them to make them think in a certain way? Take away the dollars, and then there'll be market competition for ideas, attitudes, beliefs, and policies, unlike this monopolization effect that government spending creates.
Yeah, it's really a shame, Richard. I know we're about to run out of time, but it's really a shame that Columbia took this position. I mean, think how heroic it would have been if Columbia had said, "Well, we now realize what receiving government monies does to our independence and what it subjects us to and how this distorts universities and colleges and what they teach all across the land."
Mhm.
And so President Trump, keep your $400 million, reduce the deficit with it, maybe pay a little bit of the national debt, but we're no longer going to take government funds and we're going to
Mhm.
run our institution the way we want to run it.
Mhm.
And we call on all other institutions to do the same. Wouldn't that have been fantastic?
If they had had the courage to do that, or if they believed philosophically that the money wasn't supposed to flow. But you see, they all believe that that is the role of government. And
Yeah.
if you believe that, then it becomes a battle over what the government is going to fund and whose little ideological agenda is going to be pushed.
Yeah. And as you point out, presumably Trump won't be president forever. And when a new Democrat comes in, the ping pong ball is going to go over there on the other side and back and forth. And it's just what a ridiculous way to live. What a ridiculous system. Uh,
The interventionist state, that is the government regulatory and tax spending state, invariably politicizes everything, ideologizes everything. And all these idea of, oh, the country's being politically polarized. Of course, because big dollars are pushing everyone in one direction when that money is being allocated by one political group as opposed to another.
okay. On that note, we'll wrap things up. Thank you all very much for tuning in, as always. And thank you for your great support, as always. And Richard, I greatly enjoyed the conversation, as always. And I look forward to talking to you next week.
Until next time.